Hey everyone, Tim Frisch with a Frisch Perspective here. In this video, I want to give a friendly response to a video that I was watching from Matthew Everhard called Bible Translation Tournament Sweet 16, Which Bible Translation is the Best? I specifically want to comment on what Pastor Everhard had to say about the Christian Standard Bible. He was comparing it to the Legacy Standard Bible, I believe, in that video, and he just kind of wrote off the CSB as being a translation that in his mind doesn't really contribute anything. He doesn't really understand why we need it. So that's really what I want to talk about in this video, is why the Christian Standard Bible is valuable in the Bible translation world in the English language. I want to commend to everyone this Kindle ebook that is available, I believe, for free right now. So I've been telling people about this. I even got one of my sons to read this book recently. It's about the original iteration of the CSB, the HCSB, Navigating the Horizons in Bible Translation. And as I said, it's available for free on Kindle. So certainly worth reading. And I think will really help you understand why this translation is valuable. Specifically, I want to bring out something that this book talks about that can be overlooked, and that is the difference between a revision and a new translation. And this book talks about that some. But what I want to point out is that the Christian Standard Bible, or originally the Holman Christian Standard Bible, is a new translation. It was completed originally in 2004. And it is not a revision. There's a difference between a revision and a new translation. A revision is taking an existing translation and revising it. And the English Standard Version, for example, which would be one of the translations that Dr. Everhard really likes, is actually a revision of the Revised Version, which is a revision of the American Standard Version, which is a revision of the King James Version, which is actually also a revision of the Bishop's Bible. So really, a lot of Bibles that are out there in the English language are revisions. And there's certainly a use for those. Revisions have their strength because they have historical precedent. And I think that's where Pastor Everhard really leans. He likes that historical precedent. He is Presbyterian, so that's not really surprising that he would lean in that direction. And so revisions have their validity, but also new translations also have something to contribute. And that's the difference, is that the Christian Standard Bible is not a revision. It is a new translation. So I want to actually show, I think, a really powerful example of the difference and how it can be advantageous to have a new translation. I want to look at John 3:16, and I'm starting here with the English Standard Version, which, as I said, is a revision. And it translates in a traditional way. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. So nothing wrong with that translation, but the reason that it's worded this way very likely is because this is how translations were worded before. And the philosophy of a revision is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If there isn't something glaringly wrong with a translation, then don't change it. So this is a really good example of a verse that's so well known. It's such a key verse, and because it's known in this wording, for God so loved the world, the English Standard Version didn't change it. Even though they do have a footnote here that says, for this is how God loved the world. So this is another way it could be translated. Well, if you go to the Christian Standard, or the original iteration here, the Holman Christian, the text reads, for God loved the world in this way. And I particularly love the footnotes in the original iteration of this translation because they're really helpful and extensive. And it says here, the Greek word hutos, commonly translated in John 3:16 as so or so much, occurs over 200 times in the New Testament. Almost without exception, it is an adverb of manner, not degree. And they give the example here of Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. And you can see here how this word really is talking, in this instance, about a manner of something that's taking place. The birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. It would be very odd to render it, now the birth of Christ so took place. You could render it that way, but that wouldn't make a lot of sense to us in English. The King James sometimes does actually use the word so in that way. So I'll show you an example here. Let your light so shine before men. And I think in that context, it's talking about in this way, let your light shine before men. But they use the word so there. But in Matthew 1:18, it's very clear here that the birth of Jesus Christ is taking place in this way, and it wouldn't make sense to put the word so. So why does the English Standard Version use the word so in the translation? I think it's because it's a revision rather than a fresh translation of the original language. That's probably the primary reason. Now, is that a valid translation? Absolutely. But it shows you kind of the limitation of a revision, that again, they're going to lean more with historical precedent and what people are used to hearing. If it doesn't make sense to change it, if there's no need to change it, they're going to go with what's gone before. Whereas a fresh translation like the Holman Christian and even the Christian Standard, the newest iteration here, you see God loved the world in this way. Now, because the Holman Christian was done in 2004, and I think at that time, when you made changes, you really had to show why you were making some of those changes. That's why they had that footnote. They've actually trimmed down the footnote, and they just have some other possible renderings here, which is interesting. I prefer the footnotes of the original Holman Christian Standard Bible. I think it's really helpful. So I think this shows you that the Christian Standard Bible certainly does add value to the translation world. If all you read are revisions, what you're going to get, at least in the text, a lot of times is just kind of something that's limited to the wording that is more traditional and what's historically the precedent. And while that has its advantages, and you're less likely to make certain errors, on the other hand, you're going to be hampered in some of your translation choices because of historical precedent. And I think this is a good example of that. This is just indicative of various examples that could be shown. And I actually would say if you read through the Christian Standard Bible, you're going to find that it is very insightful and helpful, and yet very true to the original languages. It is a fresh translation, but it is a very accurate translation. And I guess the only other question people would have is, well, why do we need the Christian Standard Bible when we have the NIV? And I think there are various reasons why the Christian Standard Bible, in my opinion, is even better than the NIV. One of them is it is more consciously trying to be a balance of literal and dynamic. It tries to be more word for word or literal in certain ways, even more than the NIV. But also the Holman Christian Standard Bible and the Christian Standard Bible have really good footnotes, which I think is very valuable. And let me say one other thing too about the NIV in comparison to the Christian Standard, which is interesting. Getting back to John 3:16, the New International Version says, once again, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. So here, once again, you have that traditional wording. And I would actually argue the New International Version, even though it was a fresh translation in the 70s, still in certain ways was trying, I think, to carry on some traditional wording that people were used to at the time. But the Christian Standard Bible is much more current. It's much further removed from the time when the King James was so popular. Although the King James is still popular today, but not as much as it was in years past. So all that to say, the Christian Standard Bible, I believe, clearly has value in the Bible translation market. And if anything, is probably one of the best translations out there. I think if you read it, now this is the Holman Christian Standard book, but the Christian Standard Bible has a lot in common. It's mostly the same translation, though they did make some changes to make it more, I would say, mainstream as a translation. But overall, very similar approach to translation. And I think it's one of the best out there. So hopefully after looking at this, a lot of my viewers will say, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. And maybe there are people here who didn't know a lot about the Christian Standard Bible. You could check it out. And again, this book is good to check out. And maybe even Dr. Everhard will watch this video. We're friends, by the way. He's been on my channel multiple times. So I hope that he'll watch this, and maybe I've persuaded him to bump the Christian Standard Bible up a little bit in his bracket system. I'd like to hear what he thinks about that. But anyway, I just wanted to share these thoughts with you, and I'd love to hear what you think in the comments section below. But thank you so much for taking some time to look at this topic with me from a fresh perspective.